I was privileged to hear the whole of John's Gospel being read one evening in a church in Montreal about 35 years ago. I'd never experienced anything quite like it, though I had heard of people doing similar things with Mark's Gospel. There was once a stage play by one person in the West End in London where they did Mark's Gospel all the way through, and people came night after night. And people didn't realise that, of course, the Bible is designed to be read like that. It's not designed to be read in small little chunks like we normally do in church. There's something which is more than the sum of its parts when you read a book whole. And then a bit later, I think sometime in the late 1980s, I was at a conference where I heard Galatians being done like that by an actor who had learnt Galatians and was acting out, being Paul, dictating Galatians to a scribe. And it was passionate and it was fascinating. And the scholars who were present were reading Galatians in a quite different way as a result of hearing it like that. And then gradually, and this has been a great gain in biblical scholarship actually over the last few decades, people realized that in the early church, if a church got a letter from Paul, or if one of the 7 churches of Asia received the book of Revelation, when they met for worship that week, they didn't just hear the beginning of it, they would hear the whole thing. And people say, well, they couldn't possibly take it all in. No, of course, so they would hear it again, quite possibly 2 or 3 times, straight through on the same day, or at least they would come back next week and hear it again, and they would have teachers who would be helping them understand it, and so on. So then I started to organize things like this myself in a very amateurish way in the various ministries that I've been involved with. So that, for instance, sometimes we've had, when I've been a student chaplain, we've had students reading the whole Bible. It takes about 3 days and 3 nights, or perhaps a little bit longer, and taking it in turns, but so that the whole Bible from Genesis to Revelation is flowing through that building, and people come and go, but there's a power about it which again is more than the sum of its parts. So I've always been a great advocate, both for simple folk, for children and ordinary church members, and also for scholars, in hearing the Bible as it would have been heard in the 1st century, or whenever the different bits were written, going back to the Old Testament. In other words, I think we've lost the art of understanding the Bible the way we would understand a great novel or a great play or a great poem. That it's not enough to say, oh, well, I couldn't remember all of that. You know, if you go to a Shakespeare play, you may remember the plot and you may remember some particular scenes and lines. You wouldn't be able to repeat the whole play, but you have been changed by that experience. And that, I think, is what happens when we have the public reading of Scripture in large chunks, in several chapters at a time perhaps, or in 2 or 3 chapters from the Old Testament, 2 or 3 from the New. People experience Scripture and they experience God in a whole new way. So I've been a fan for a long time, and I'm delighted to see this project being taken forward in the way it is.